Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the Last Round Podcast. We appreciate you guys listening, whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Boxing Socials, YouTube channel, wherever you're at, however you're listening. We appreciate it. Coming off a rematch in the heavyweight division between Dillian Whyte and Alexander Povetkin this past weekend on DAZN in the Rock of Gibraltar. I think that's my favorite. What do you think, Mike? I think that's my favorite title of an event or of a city, of a location, at least recently. What do you think?
Well, definitely recently. Most of them have been in the bubble. So we haven't really had many other names. So yeah, definitely it was good to see them kind of back to normality of only a crowd of 500, but it sounded more like 5,000.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely cool to see the location, and then, the 500 people in attendance there. But this week we welcome back a recurring guest. He's been here on the Last Round quite a few times now, and he's always a listener and fan favorite. People always message us and tweet us saying, "Oh, you need to get Iole back on. He always knows the latest updates in the boxing world." So Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports, welcome back to the Last Round.
I appreciate you having me, guys. Good to be on with you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. So as we just touched on the rematch this past weekend on DAZN, Dillian Whyte gets the 4th round TKO over Alexander Povetkin, gets his revenge, how it's been titled in many ways in boxing circles since it happened this past Saturday. Were you surprised at how the fight turned out, or did you expect a more competitive matchup?
Well, I picked Whyte to win, so, I'm not surprised that he won the fight. I guess I was surprised. I thought Povetkin would not have taken the fight had his COVID, impacted his training. And I think you have to think that there was some impact to him, but I don't want to take anything away from Dillian. I thought Dillian really looked good in the fight and did what he had to do. The fact that, Povetkin wasn't able to overcome the illness that he had and kind of get into the kind of shape he had says a lot. But I also think he was being hit hard by Whyte, by some of those punches, and that impacted it. So I was a little surprised that it was only 4 rounds. I thought it might be a little bit more tactical fight early. And then, Povetkin is kind of a durable guy. He goes down, but he's able to hang in there and fight. What did he go 5 or 6 times against Klitschko? He's a guy that generally, can get up off the canvas and find a way to survive and win a fight. So I kind of thought it would go longer, but I wasn't shocked that Whyte won.
How do you, because in the first fight, there was Dillian Whyte, at least to many people watching, was winning that fight up until he got knocked out. So at least to me, when Mike and I spoke about this last week, when we previewed the fight, I felt it was kind of going to be the same thing. And Dillian Whyte was just going to be a lot more cautious. There was at times where he kind of was a little wild with his punches. But he was able to land the bigger shots and obviously end up getting the knockout decision. Where do you think Povetkin goes from here? He's been around for a long time. You mentioned that he's fought the likes of Klitschko, and before this loss, his only losses, I believe, were to Anthony Joshua and Klitschko. So where does Povetkin go from here at this stage of his career?
You wonder how much he has left. You saw he struggled a while back against Michael Hunter. A fight that I think a prime Povetkin would win, right? And win fairly handily. Michael's a smaller heavyweight. And, I don't say that to dog Michael, but I just think that, he and Povetkin are at different levels, or were at different levels in their career. And so I think that, his age is starting to show. He's looking like a 40-plus-year-old fighter right now. can he win fights? Yeah, he's a smart boxer, and he has good combinations. And if he hits you on the chin, as he showed in the first fight, he can win. But he doesn't look sturdy, right? I mean, and one of the knockdowns in the first fight, it didn't look like a punch to me that should have put him on his back, and down he went. And so I think that he has to have a long talk with his team about, can I do this at the same level? Because, if you had the career he had, an Olympic gold medalist, hold the heavyweight championship for a period of time, won a lot of big fights, you don't want to be a stepping stone for young guys on the way up. And, I think that, that's sort of the direction he's headed, a big name that some of the young guys can, use to say, hey, I beat Alexander Povetkin. I think he's a really good guy. I'm not saying he's totally at the end of the line, but I think he's, kind of walking that path right now.
When maybe some people don't remember, but Deontay Wilder was supposed to schedule to fight him a couple years ago. He was actually going to Russia
He was on
fight.
the plane, I think, when it happened.
Right, yeah, I believe it was like really close to the day, or they were going for a press conference or something, but it was very, very close to the entire event. At that point, kind of rewinding in Povetkin's career for a moment, what do you think that Povetkin what kind of matchup would he have given Deontay Wilder at that time?
I think he would have been a hard fight for Deontay. Deontay is going to struggle with guys who know how to box, and Povetkin knows how to box. So I think that would have been a tough fight. Now, Deontay has fought a lot of guys that know how to box, and everybody tries to box against him, and he has that tremendous power that he hits you with, and he can end a fight with one punch. And he's so aggressive that it puts mental pressure on guys. So I think Wilder would have probably won that fight, but I don't think he would have looked good in doing it. It would have been one of those fights kind of like, he's getting outclassed, outboxed, and then boom, he lands something and wins. I think that would have been the type of fight, we would have seen out of him. I don't think Povetkin is good enough or was good enough at that time, because I think he was, 37 or 38 at the time. That was supposed to happen, that he could have kept it up for 12 rounds and avoided Wilder's power that whole way. But I think he would have boxed really nicely for a long period of that fight and then gotten caught and probably stopped.
For Dillian Whyte, this was obviously for the WBC interim world heavyweight title. It's not any surprising news to boxing fans, but Dillian Whyte's been in that, I guess, mandatory limbo for a long time with the whole WBC situation. Does it seem like that's going to happen again? Do you think he's going to be stuck in limbo again in terms of getting a WBC title shot?
It is so crazy. I mean, it is so nuts, I think the WBC has made some strides under Mauricio Suleiman, but in some ways they haven't. And, this is one of those situations, that's just nuts. I mean, why is there an interim champion when there's a champion in the division, right? To me, like an interim champion, there's a role for an interim champion. Some fans say there should never be one. Well, we all know that fighters make more money when they fight for a title. And if let's say the champion breaks his leg, just for the sake of argument, and he's out for 9 months or a year, well, it's not fair to the rest of the division to hold it up. So then have an interim championship, so somebody gets to fight for the title, and then maybe there's one defense in there. Then you go back and immediately fight the full champion. But when the full champion is there and wins the title in the ring, like Tyson Fury did, there's no reason for an interim champion. So, that being said, I think it's going to be tough for him to get a meaningful fight here, because it looks like we're closing in on Fury Joshua. I think there's still work to be done. And, whenever they say, there's work to be done, it means they don't have the money to pay them. And that's really what it is right now. They're still trying to, raise funding for this fight. But if they get that funding, then I think, it's going to put Dillian Whyte on the outside looking in, and he's going to be. So to me, the fight to make would be Wilder, right? Give him a big fight. Give him a guy that's been a champion, that's a big name in the division. I think Wilder would welcome the idea that if he won, he would have the WBC interim belt. And then, he would be back in that kind of runway with the, Fury Joshua winner.
How would you see that potential matchup going between Wilder and Dillian Whyte?
My reaction would be to say Wilder, but then all the stuff that's happened to Wilder subsequent to his loss to Fury concerns me. And he took a lot of punishment in that fight from a guy who's 6'9", 270 pounds, who was going forward and coming aggressively, and that impacts you. And Deontay's behavior, subsequent to that fight has made me concerned about him. I think if it's the Deontay Wilder, that fought Luis Ortiz going into this fight, I say that's a Deontay Wilder, KO victory. But you just don't know what Deontay Wilder you're going to get. I like Deontay a lot. I also like Dillian. I think they're both good guys. I like Deontay a lot. Something happened over this last little bit with his thought process, and it's a concern.
I mean, like you mentioned, Kevin, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua are looked to be heading in towards a clash maybe sometime later this year. And there's been information out there that it might be a 2-fight deal, or like a combo event going on back to back. So I mean, realistically, if Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua fight and sign to a 2-fight deal, whoever wins the first one, they rematch and it goes forward. Realistically, Dillian Whyte seems like he's going to be outside the box looking in for probably more than a year. I mean, wouldn't you say so, realistically?
Of course, and that's where, now you got to look at, all right, let's see if we can make a match with Andy Ruiz or, guys like that, right? Wilder, those are the guys. I think this Iole Ruiz fight, I think Ruiz wins that fight. If Ruiz wins it, hey, why not have him fight Dillian Whyte unless Ruiz fights Wilder? I mean, I think there's a lot of good fights that can be made among those, couple of guys that are there. I think, even Joe Joyce is, kind of getting up into that. I think Joe is too slow myself. I don't think Joe has the speed to compete with the guys at the top level like Deontay and like Dillian Whyte. But I think there's fights for Dillian that he could get, if Fury and Joshua go, that would make him some money. And, because he's not going to get the championship shot. And even if they, somehow miraculously strip Fury, which they would never do, because there's more money in Fury than there is in Dillian Whyte. But even if they would, nobody's going to look at him as the champion, right? I mean, the Fury Joshua winner is the champion. So, and Dillian knows that. So I think the whole thing for him now is taking fights that will help him on his cause when he does fight, the winner, and B, make him the most possible money.
Where does somebody like Usyk stand in the heavyweight division at this point?
I have Usyk in my pound for pound list. I think he's fantastic. But he doesn't seem to be wanting to fight that much to me, and I'm going to say this, I am very, by virtue of having him in my pound for pound list, I'm very high on Usyk. I almost took him out when I saw his Chaz Witherspoon fight. I mean, to me, Chaz Witherspoon, my God, was shot over the hill years ago. And you're getting shaken up by Chaz Witherspoon. I mean, that should have been a no-hitter for Usyk. He had no problems with him. And so that kind of concerned me. And I wonder if it concerned Usyk's team. And, they're being very judicious about what they do. I think he's a great boxer. And, if you would have said to me prior to that Chaz Witherspoon fight, how would Usyk do against Wilder? I would have said, boy, that's a tough fight for Wilder. But now I go, if Chaz Witherspoon can hit him, Deontay can hit him, and if Deontay hits anybody, the fight's over. So it's weird. I'm just not sure that maybe he's mentally cut out to be a heavyweight.
Kind of turning the focus to the Joshua Fury reported negotiations. The latest information I believe is that there's been an agreement, some type of agreement in place, but there's no site yet. They're still exploring venues and looking at the site fees and stuff. What's the latest from what you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, they have an agreement on the split. Is basically, okay, if we get $100 million in, this is how we're going to split the $100 million. That's what they have an agreement on. Now you have to find a place to get the money, and that's going to be difficult. Like, it looked like the Middle East would be easy, but then the pandemic raged back up over there again, and so they're not having fans right now. Las Vegas is slowly opening, but they're not even expected to get to 50% until May. The Lord only knows when they would be at 100% capacity, and you can't go less than 100% capacity with this kind of fight. So either the fighters are going to have to take significantly less money than they bargained for, which I don't think they're going to do, or the fight gets pushed back. It would not shock me at all if this fight doesn't happen until September, October timeframe.
And that's, like you said, that's kind of dependent on, like you said, this kind of fight needs 100% capacity in likely a big stadium like a Wembley or something like that. So do you think if for some reason, if the world by that point, I mean, it looks like everything's kind of going in a better direction than it has been, but if it's not at 100% capacity in terms of fans by like maybe August or September, do you think this fight does not happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tyson might end up fighting Dillian Whyte in that case, right? Because I think Tyson's going to look at it. Tyson's already upset. He's 14 months now from the fight with Wilder, hasn't fought. And the phrase he used, and it struck me, "I'm a fighting man." And if there ever was a guy that was the apt description of it, Tyson Fury is a fighting man, and I think he's going to want to fight. And so if they have a situation where they can't pull the Joshua fight off because of money, I think he'll turn to Dillian Whyte and say, "Let's go," and get that fight.
So with that, from what you've heard, from your sources, because Anthony Joshua is obviously on Sky Sports and also has a relationship with DAZN, and then Fury at the moment, at least in the United States, has a relationship with ESPN and Top Rank. Would this be some type of a joint pay-per-view, or what have you heard in that regard?
Yeah, I think in the U.S. it would be ESPN and then distributing it. And then, DAZN now, I mean, they're even coming out and saying, our focus is going to be in, Europe. Kevin Mayer, their new chairman, is looking at Europe, and I think that's for them right now. That's where their best their growth opportunity is, and so I think that's where they're going to look. So you can do a joint pay-per-view and have DAZN distributed in the U.S., but they're probably not going to make a dent in the overall number on the Fox ESPN joint pay-per-view. The overwhelming number were ESPN buys. So I think that's. ESPN is going to be the one that'll be the lead here, and I think the other organizations will be in Europe. DAZN will be able to sell some here, but I don't think they're going to sell as many here as they want, and it goes against their model because if you have a pay-per-view, like you even look what they did with Canelo. I thought it was a great idea with what they did with Canelo. Hey, we'll sell this as a pay-per-view, and you get, I think it was 4-month subscription to it. I thought it was a smart move. But that's not going to fly, for people who are going to want to see Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua fight each other and their subscribers to DAZN. So it's going to have to be a regular pay-per-view. That's why I think it's going to be a problem for DAZN.
All right, also going on that DAZN card this past Saturday night, the Matchroom card, the son of the Hitman, Ricky Hatton, actually made his professional debut, and he was getting a lot of attention. Because he's obviously of his father. Campbell Hatton got the first professional win of his career. What'd you think? Did you catch that fight first off? And if you did, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I didn't see it till Sunday. I was at the UFC fight. So I saw the Dillian Whyte fight live, but I did not see Campbell until Sunday. And, it certainly was not Ricky Hatton, and I think he's got a lot of work to do to get to a level where, you can look at him and say, this guy's a prospect.
I mean, traditionally or historically, at least, there's not that many, I guess, sons of famous fighters or who make it big, who become bigger than their fathers. I mean, the hype behind him is already big, especially just this past weekend, which has much attention as he was getting. I mean, isn't he fighting an uphill battle in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, always difficult, no matter what sport it is, when you have a father or a mother that was successful in the same sport, and you're going to go into that sport, you're going to be compared to them, and there's so much pressure on you. And Campbell grew up in a different life than Ricky, right? Ricky had money when he was an adult, and so Campbell had a more privileged life than what Ricky had. And Ricky had that hunger that grew up from not having a lot and having to build himself up, and Campbell didn't have that. That doesn't mean he can't be successful, but it's a tougher start. It's a tougher way to go. That discipline that comes naturally to the guys who have nothing and they're willing to do anything to get to the top. That's not there in guys that are sons of a rich dad, right? And, and then a famous dad, and everybody's patting him on the back and doing all this. Now, the one thing that Campbell would have had that Ricky didn't have, going in is, he had every advantage, every good trainer, anything he needed, his father could provide for him. And so, that was one advantage. But I think it's a really difficult situation to be in, especially in the UK, right, where Ricky Hatton, it's such a big boxing country, where Ricky is one of the, all-time big, most popular fighters, beloved still to this day. And now, his son is trying to follow in his footsteps. And, his son's going to have to not only carry on the tradition of himself, but for his father. And that's asking a lot of a young guy.
Since Mike grew up in the UK, and now he's over here in the Southern California area. But Mike, touching on Ricky Hatton, while you were growing up over there, what was it like during his prime, and especially as he fought Pacquiao and Mayweather?
He just kind of larger than life character, but at the same time he was a man of the people. He'd fight and then he'd go for a drink with everybody, and everyone could kind of relate to that. He's kind of that working class hero. So, and then he used the the Man City link. So a lot of the people that followed the football during the day, they then go and watch the boxing on the nighttime. And I think that's kind of what Josh Warrington bought into. And that's why he managed to, be such a huge attraction now, because he has the Leeds fans behind him. So for Campbell, obviously, he's got that head start, because I'm sure a lot of the Man City fans are probably going to follow him. But at the same time, that's a lot of eyes on him. And if he's going to make anything, he's going to have to go down, I think, that Conor Benn route, slowly build him up over time, because he hasn't really had a vast amateur experience. So he's kind of comes into the pro ranks, and you could see he wasted a lot of nervous energy early on, kind of blew himself out after 2 rounds, to be honest with you. So I think, slowly but surely, if they're going to do anything with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll see. It's interesting to see. I just hope the kid makes it. We obviously wish him the best of luck, because personally, as a fan, I just want to see the chance come back that they did for Ricky Hatton, but they do it for his son this time. Those were always.
That was one of the nuttiest nights ever. There were only one Ricky Hatton at the Mayweather fight. Wow, that was something else. Yeah, until the fight started, and then it was.
No, yeah, I mean, like Kevin, you were obviously at quite a few of those events, especially when Ricky Hatton, like you said, fought Floyd Mayweather, and the fans they bring a different vibe to the event. It definitely happens like that. It's interesting.
The only time the MGM was drank dry, right?
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, I'll never forget that week. It was just, everywhere you went, there were drunk Brits around singing Ricky Hatton songs. It was great. It was really, really fun. And, a funny story that week, I had written a column, and I basically said, Mayweather's going to totally outclass him, a much better fighter. And this isn't even going to be close. And I think the betting line was relatively close at the time. And I ran into Billy Graham as we were going to the media day, and he wanted to kill me. And he was like, he did not like my column that I wrote. And after the fight, I saw him, and, he didn't speak to me, but I thought he might come over and, okay, you were right. And he just kind of stomped away.
I mean, in your vast experience being at fights, including MMA fights and boxing fights, Kevin, touching on that topic of, the atmosphere for like a Ricky Hatton. I mean, what else could you compare something like that to that Ricky Hatton fans brought to those types of fights.
Yeah, I think from that specific atmosphere, nothing was close to that. I think the best atmosphere that I can ever remember was Tyson and Holyfield too, because it was such an unbelievable fight, and every single person was jazzed up. And I mean, Las Vegas was sold out up and down the Strip. And it was really just an amazing event. And so everybody was into it. But, the Hatton Mayweather fight, and to a lesser degree, Hatton Pacquiao, the fans were just such a big part of that. Fight week was fun and festive, and the Hatton fans were everywhere. And, you just saw them all over the place, mostly in bars, but they were everywhere, and they were drinking and having a good time. And they were in the arenas cheering and singing, so early. That it's just like there's not much atmosphere like that. Like the Corrales-Castillo fight, as an example, I was at ringside at that, and I've talked to a lot of people who said they were there. There was like barely 5,000 people in the building, right? I mean, it was half full. Now it was crazy when that ending happened in the 10th round, but it didn't have the atmosphere that this did. No, not even close.
Moving on to this upcoming Saturday, the 3rd of April, in Dubai on ESPN for the WBO Super Featherweight World Championship. Jamel Herring, 22-2, goes up against Carl Frampton, 28-2. So they've been trying to make this matchup for a while, and then the pandemic obviously affected its schedule. But now, as of right now, pending that nothing else happens between now and Saturday. What do you think happens in this matchup?
I like the fight. I like Carl Frampton in the fight myself. I just think a little bit better overall fighter than Jamel. Jamel didn't look good his last time out. I didn't think Carl has a little bit more going for him. I think he's a more versatile fighter, a little bit more pop. So I think, that Frampton will figure out a way to win this fight. I think, Herring's going to make it tough for him at times. Herring's quick, but Herring is also starting to get up there, and we might be seeing some of the miles on him that are, kind of getting on his body. So I like Frampton to win this fight and become the first 3-division Irish champion.
If Frampton, even if Frampton obviously as likely the favorite, if he wins, or even if Herring wins for that matter, where does the winner go from there? I mean, you have somebody like a Shakur Stevenson at 130 pounds right now. I mean, also a top-ranked fighter. Would that be the ideal, maybe not next fight, but maybe within the next 2 fights that you could see top-ranked going in that direction?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting how they go there. I think that maybe you put him in with Valdez, but now Shakur wants Valdez, and that. So they have some decisions to make. And what about Belcher, right? So the other question is, is Belcher just can't make weight anymore in that division, or is he still able to make it and compete? And if he is, then maybe you put him in with the winner and give him a shot at the title. He had told me, meaning Miguel Belcher, before he fought Valdez, that he was looking to potentially move up to lightweight. So I don't know that he will be a viable opponent for him, but I think he might be a guy too that's in that mix. But Frank Espinosa is the manager of Oscar Valdez, is going to have a lot of options because a lot of people want to fight Oscar, and that's always a good thing.
In your opinion, Kevin, who do you think is the best 130-pound fighter at the moment?
Not even close. Shakur Stevenson, not even close. I had Shakur in my pound-for-pound top 10 until 2 weeks ago on the Chocolatito Estrada fight. I had as 9 and 10. I had Beterbiev and Shakur, and I dropped them both, and I put in Chocolatito and Estrada. And I kind of felt Chocolatito won the fight. But Estrada got the decision. So, Estrada, who's been, really right there for a long time, you get a win over a guy like Chocolatito, you should be in. I didn't think Beterbiev's performance against Dinas was particularly memorable, particularly great. And then, I just felt like, 10 came down to Chocolatito and Shakur. And while I love Shakur's potential, when I saw Chocolatito at that age fight the way he did against Estrada, I just decided to pop him over him. So but I think Shakur is such an elite talent. And I think, he's a guy to me that we could be talking about in 3 or 4 years as the pound for pound best in the world. I mean, I think he's that kind of fighter. And I think he's no question the best 130 pounder out there.
By the end of his career, where do you see him finishing and what his career at what weight class?
I don't think he goes up much more than 140, right? And I wonder if he can even go to 140. I mean, he doesn't have the frame. When Floyd fought at 130, he had the wide shoulders, and you knew, okay, he was, he's a live build, but that he could put on the weight and get bigger. And I don't really see that in Shakur. I think Shakur was a guy that, smaller in the amateurs, and he just hasn't put on that bulk and hasn't gotten this, the kind of size you want to think, see, and a guy that would maybe move up to welterweight. So to me, no question, I think, he'll go from 26 to 30 to 35. And I think, usually when you can fight at 35, you can probably fight at 40. So I think he'll probably do that. But I think welterweight is another leap. And I don't know that he'll ever have the power. He'll be one of those guys if he fights a welterweight that, fights backwards because he's got the power at this weight to hurt you and make you respect him. But you get up there at 47, I don't think he's going to have that. And so he's going to have to stink out the joint basically to win fights.
Kevin, you just said that you thought, Shakur is going to be, pound for pound great coming up, and coming from someone like yourself that's been around the boxing business for a long time, what is it that he does that makes you think that?
I think he's such a he has such a great boxing IQ. He understands distance. He understands timing. He understands what punches to throw at what time. He has great footwork in the ring. And he hits harder at this weight than people give him credit for, right? At 26 and 30, I think, there's nobody standing there sticking their chin out at him and saying, taking a shot at me. He's not Mike Tyson type of power, but he's got that snapping power that'll hurt. And he can stop guys with an accumulation of punches over rounds. And he has that radar defensively that he sees the punches coming. And so he can be in perfect punching position himself and be able to just move ever so slightly to get out of the way and then counter. And I think he has so many things in his game that make you look at him and say, this guy is going to be a big star. He reminds me, I don't like to compare people to Floyd Mayweather, but he's the closest guy out there in terms of IQ and sort of being shrewd in the ring that I can see compared to Floyd Mayweather.
Kevin, out of I think they call them the four princes. Is it Shakur, Ryan, Teofimo Lopez, and who's the fourth one I'm missing?
Devin Haney.
Devin Haney. So in 5 to 10 years from now, do you think Shakur will have the best legacy, the best resume?
Well, so you forgot Gervonta Davis there too, right? So at lightweight, we're going Teofimo, Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, and Devin Haney. And then at 130, we're going to have Shakur. I think the lightweight guys have the better chance to have the better resume because theoretically, we'll see what happens, but they can all fight each other. They're in the same weight class. They're relatively same age, so they should be moving up at the same time. So as they move, they should be in classes, so we should be able to see them fight each other. But I think Shakur could he compete with those guys? Heck yeah. Could he beat, I think the tough fight for him would be Lopez because of physicality and size. I think he has not that much trouble with Devin Haney. I think two unbelievably fast guys, right? Devin hasn't fought anybody like Shakur, and I think it would be an eye-opening experience for him to fight a Shakur Stevenson. I'm a big Devin Haney fan, but I think Shakur, would be up there. And I think the same thing of Ryan Garcia. But I think at the end of the day, when you say who's going to have the greatest legacy, to me, that's who won the most significant fights, not who's pound for pound the best. And I think that, we're looking, you already have Teofimo Lopez has a win over Lomachenko, and if he can go and beat, say those other three guys in that weight class, boy, what a legacy that would be to leave. You beat Teofimo. I mean, you beat Vasily Lomachenko, Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis, and Devin Haney. A lot to do, a lot of work to do. But if he pulls that off, boy, and he has the best chance at it, that would be something.
Kevin, you mentioned ring IQ and how you believe Shakur Stevenson has a very, very high ring IQ in terms of boxing and being in the ring in general. This question just popped into my head, and who would do you correlate being pound for pound, number one, like a Canelo, having the best IQ in the sport? Or would you say somebody like a Shakur Stevenson, based on what you see, might have a better IQ?
I think Canelo is more of a veteran. So at this point, I think his boxing IQ would, exceed somebody like Shakur, right? I think, when I look at Shakur, I see potential. He can really get, better. And he's already very good at it. And it has the potential to, learn the sport even more than he knows it now. I mean, I think he's as good as virtually anybody in the game. I think Tyson Fury has a great fight IQ. I think, Canelo has a great fight IQ. There's a few guys like that out there that are really smart. They understand the game. Floyd Mayweather was so good at that, for so long. I think Shakur is among the best there is. Is he absolutely the best at that right now? Probably not. But I think he has the potential as he grows into the sport and gets more time in the gym. Terrence Crawford being another one. To go that way. So I think it's interesting. I don't know that he's the best right now, but he certainly has a ton of potential and growth to get there.
Also this weekend on DAZN from Uzbekistan, MJ Akhmadaliev, for first defense of his title since he beat Danny Roman for it, goes up against. All right, Mike, you're taking this one. How do you pronounce this name?
Correct me, Kevin, if I'm wrong. Ryosuke Iwasa.
You cut me. The one thing I'm glad about is that I have to write about them. I don't have to say their names.
Yeah, we have to say their names every week. This is for the WBA and IBF Super Bantamweight Unified titles. As I mentioned, MJ, who actually trains in nearby Coachella Valley out here in Southern California. This is his first title defense since beating Danny Roman in Miami last year. What do you think about MJ? And did you think did you pick him to win when he won the titles against Danny Roman last year?
That was a good fight, and no, I did not. I thought Roman was in a pretty good spot going into that fight, and big win for him. And I just look at this guy thinking he's got a lot of growth, another guy with a lot of growth potential. And so, he's a guy I would keep an eye at for, as, to make some noise in that division as he goes forward. Has a pretty complete game, and obviously works hard at it, and is already pretty advanced.
What did you think? Mike paid a visit, I believe, back in January to Joel Diaz at his gym in Indio, California, the Coachella Valley, because everybody's always wondered how he has so many of these, Russian fighters or fighters from that general area.
The stand countries, yeah.
Right. And Mike, what was his answer? How did he detail it?
He had a link up, and the one of the managers kind of asked him, do you know anybody? We want to try and get the fighters over to California to train. And Joel was like, yeah, well, send them to me. And then they came to Joel, and then they just liked his style. They liked his kind of, like, I would say, I don't think
it was after the Provodnikov fight, right?
Right. Yeah, it was the same management group. He's got like an old school kind of military style, and I think they like that from being from that area of the world. So I think they like Joe Diaz. They like his attitude, and then obviously, look at them. They're taking over.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what. There's so many, Eastern European fighters out there that are, the one name that pops into my mind is Israel Madrimov or Madrimov. I see that's another one. I'm not good at pronouncing the name, but who I think is very good. And there's a lot of those, those guys like that. Though they had great amateur programs in those Eastern European countries over the last, 10 or 15 years. And we're seeing a lot of the fighters now. Gennady Golovkin is a little bit older, but he's one of those guys too. That is a product of that system. I think. I agree with what Mike said. I think Joel is a really good guy for them because Joel has a lot of structure. And, it's kind of like, okay, this is my philosophy. This is how we're going to do it. And he's the guy in charge. And that's sort of what they grew up with. And I think, that translates very well. And that's why Joel is, doing, it's kind of like horses for courses. And I think that, Joel is the right guy for somebody like that.
Absolutely. Moving on to the news and notes of the show. Terrence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao, according to Top Rank, is, I don't want to say close to being finalized, but it's being talked about.
It's not close, yeah.
It's not close to being finalized, but it's being talked about. I think there was a report that Top Rank has informed its network partner ESPN and the in-demand pay-per-view distributor to hold a date in June for a possible matchup between these two. You just said it's not close at the moment as of today, Kevin, but is it realistic?
I really don't see how it's realistic, especially on that date. Number one, Triller has Teofimo Lopez on that date. And they already have requested from In Demand that day. So there's two channels, so they could actually have two pay-per-views. But we're talking about they'd have to go to the Middle East to get the fight. Manny is not, and I spoke to his publicist today, not seriously training. He's working out, staying in shape, being ready. But the fight would be basically 2 months from now. And Manny is 42 years old and has not fought in 2 years. And now you're going to tell me that he's going to take a fight on pay-per-view in a country where it's going to, they're diametrically opposite us time-wise, and they're going to try to sell pay-per-views here with Crawford doesn't like to do interviews anyways. Now he's going to be doing Zoom all the time. And Manny, to me, it doesn't make sense, and then, the Lopez Kambosos fight on Triller, there's going to be another couple fights added to that card. And I don't know who, but I was teased today I was talking to Ryan Kavanaugh of Triller saying there's going to be a really big name on that card fighting. So he just put De La Hoya on the July 3rd card. Who knows who he's going to come up with here. So if you're them and they have the fight in the U.S., I think this is more Top Rank, just trying to appease Crawford, trying to make Crawford think they're doing something because, there's no fight for him, and B, trying to stick it to Teofimo a little bit, given, the relationship that happened, and the problems that they've had.
Kevin, from what you know from covering both sports, MMA and boxing, it looked like the Conor McGregor-Manny Pacquiao fight was on the cards and it all fell apart with his loss to Poirier. Is that correct?
I don't know that actually is correct. Audiatar manages Conor, and then he has a piece of paper with Manny. But Manny is one of these guys that signs with multiple people. He's done it, many times in the past. And Al Heyman, among others, claims he also manages Manny. So we don't really know, what's going on. And Dana White never gave the okay for Conor to fight Manny. And, I just find it hard to believe that he would do that when Conor is at his, kind of stretch run in terms of being at his peak, right? I don't think he's, dropped dramatically off, but, he's seeing the end of the line in terms of being at his peak, right? And these are where he's going to put the million, pay-per-view numbers out there. Do they just throw him into boxing and, and I think Dana would know what would happen in the fight based on what he's seen before, so I just don't see that. I think there's too many hurdles to have made that fight.
Bob Arum said, I think in an interview this week, that he is planning to announce a major pay-per-view fight for Terrence Crawford. Is he hoping to announce Manny Pacquiao as an opponent? Is that what he's talking about?
He's been saying that, all along. Like, so several times now, Bob has told me and other reporters, we offered Manny Pacquiao a fight against Crawford, and he declined it. The one day I hung up from Bob and I called Manny, and I right on the phone right afterwards, and I got Manny on the phone immediately, and he denied having talked to him. And so, there's, who knows, like, again, who knows what the truth is, because with Manny, you would think Bob would be talking to the right people with Manny, but with Manny, there's always a cast of thousands and it changes. And so who is the person you negotiate with at the moment? That's a problem. But, because I don't want to I'm not a person that calls somebody a liar. So I don't want to call Bob a liar, but twice Manny has told me, no, there's nothing going on. Sean Gibbons, who was the head of MP Promotions, has vehemently ever denied all these things that have come out and said that's not true. And, one point he said to me, Bob is chain smoking marijuana, right? He's high as a kite, right? So, I think Bob is trying to do anything he can to get Crawford that big fight. And they're just striking out. It's really a bizarre situation.
What's that famous line from Bob Arum? Yesterday I was lying, today I'm telling the truth.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's the go-to line. I mean, it's like you said, Kevin, it's Top Rank and Bob Arum in general, they're just in a tough spot with Crawford, because none of us doubt that Crawford obviously does it. He wants to fight the best guys, who are obviously across the street, for lack of a better statement, with the PBC and Sean Porter, Errol Spence and those guys. But it seems like it's like a network deal, and then obviously the purses splits and stuff like that. I mean, is there a reason why maybe like with somebody like Crawford, with the talent that he has and what he's proven so far up until this point, wouldn't you, as if you were his promoter, for example, Kevin, wouldn't you just kind of swallow your pride and say, all right, let's just send him over to Fox or Showtime and have him just take the belt and bring it back?
Yeah, I mean, you run into problems that way because, like, ESPN, this is a network that's used to having LeBron James and Tom Brady and, the biggest stars in the sports that they have the rights to on their air. And now you're going to turn around and say, okay, we only have, Top Rank has how many really truly big stars, and we're going to take one of them in his first big fight, send him away, right? I mean, that's a hard sell to the ESPN executive saying, wait a minute, we just got this thing here. So there's, I blame Heyman in this. Heyman gets blamed for a lot of stuff that I don't think is his fault. But in this, he played this game. He didn't play it for the good of boxing. He played it for the good of the PBC, and it worked, right? He's gotten all these PBC guys big fights, and he's kept Crawford on the outside. But I think, when you're in boxing and you're making your living off boxing, you're prominent, if it's like you or I, and we have one fighter, that's one thing. But when you're a guy like an Arum or a Heyman, you have a responsibility to the sport at large that's making you successful. And try to make all these big fights. But Al's basically saying, you know what, until you're with us, you're not with us. And we're, unless we absolutely are desperately needing you, we're not going to bring you into our club. And I think that's what happened here. And the only thing I blame Crawford for is when he signed this extension with ESPN, I think it was late 2018 or 2019. He knew this was exactly the way it was at the time. Like, why did he sign with ESPN with Top Rank, knowing what the situation was? I mean, I think that was the time to go across the street, so to speak, and sign with the PBC, where you can say, okay, now I'm on the same side as Errol Spence, and I want and Danny Garcia, et cetera. I want these fights. It's been very difficult, and that I think he regrets that decision. I think Top Rank is the best promoter out there, long term, but they, in this situation, when they can't make the fights, they can't do much for you.
Because of what you just said there, Kevin, I think obviously the PBC are going to keep all of their stars away from Crawford, knowing that his contract's up, I believe, October, I think, is the
I think it's end of October, yeah.
Do you think then we'll see Terence Crawford cross the street, as they say?
I think that probably makes sense, right? Top rank, I never bet against Bob Arum, right? And he's a genius, and he always has an ace up his sleeve. And it could be, well, Crawford owes us X more months, But if the contract ends in October, as we believe it does, I don't see how Crawford can't move over, even though, a lot of the guys that were really viable are now kind of on that. Keith Thurman, at one point would have been a great fight for Crawford. He hasn't fought 2 years, and Danny Garcia's coming off yet another loss. Sean Porter, how much time does he have left at that top level? So all of a sudden, what was an embarrassment, Manny Pacquiao, who's 42 years old, hasn't fought in 2 years. The PBC had an embarrassment of riches at welterweight. All of a sudden, it's starting to thin out. Now, I think you go to the PBC because of one guy, and that's Errol Spence, and you want to make that fight. And then, presumably by then, Spence will have fought Ugas and, taken care of Ugas. And so now all the belts will be lined up. So the PBC can put on that fight that would be for supremacy at 147.
Another rising contender, I think we could label him as is Virgil Ortiz. Just came off the most significant win of his career against Mo Hooker in Dallas, Texas recently. And in his post-fight, they asked him about Crawford. He was getting asked about it, I think, that whole fight week. And then they asked him again. I think Chris Mannix asked him in the ring after the fight. And I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe he said, I don't care if I'm ready. I want that fight in terms of going after Crawford. What do you think? Do you think a Virgil Ortiz is ready for a Crawford?
No, but I don't think hardly anybody is, right? I mean, so I love his attitude, right? And I love what he said. And, Ryan Garcia said a similar thing when I was interviewing him, and I talked about, hey, this guy might be a little too experienced for you or whatever. And he goes, I don't care about losing. I want to fight the fights. I want the fans to know I want to fight the best guys. And that, to me, that's the attitude that will carry the sport of boxing back to the top. You're always going to have hardcore fans like us who love it and who were going to be with it through thick and thin. But what we don't have is we don't have that casual fan who knows the fighters' names, maybe don't watch all the shows and all the club fights, but they know the champions and the top level guys. That person has kind of disappeared out of the space because we have so much trouble. It was 5 or 6 years to get Mayweather Pacquiao made. And, look at what we're going through with Joshua and Fury. And we went through it with Wilder and those two guys, right? It just, that stuff, people were sick of that. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear about the fights and that they're fighting each other. And so I like the fact that, you're hearing, Teofimo Lopez said at his post-fight press conference when he beat Loma, I want to fight all these guys. Ryan Garcia said it. You heard Virgil say it on the air last week. I think, another good, welterweight, Rashidi Ellis said it. I talked to Jaron Ennis. He said it, right? Jaron Ennis wants to get in that mix and fight those guys. So I think, this next generation of fighters that's on the way up, I like what I'm hearing out of a lot of them. They're not talking about side of the street. They're not talking about purses. Hey, purse is important. You're risking your life when you get in there. You need to make the most money. But you also can't stand in the way of making the best fights.
We were mentioning Teofimo Lopez, and obviously he's scheduled to fight on Triller, the new game in town in the boxing world. What's your take on this whole Triller situation and how they're going about putting on these types of events, kind of mixing in mainstream entertainment, musical performances with, I guess, celebrity boxing in a sense and real boxing? I mean, what's your take on that from your experience?
I have a big story today on Yahoo Sports. I was at the Triller press conference last week, and I talked to the Triller owner, Ryan Kavanaugh, Snoop Dogg I spoke to, and all the fighters who are going to be on this card. I thought that the production of the last show was fantastic. The Tyson card, the way they switched between the music and the fights, it was fantastic. one of the interesting things that I put in my story today, they are never going to sell tickets. So they're going to be in Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, 75,000 seats. They plan no ticket sales. They're going to give 100 tickets away in contests to, fans are going to call them the golden tickets, but they're going to set up sound stages. So it's going to be lit. There's going to be sound stages for their musical acts and then the ring, and they're all going to be lit differently. And they don't have to worry about, fans there. They can do, and that's what they're going to continue to do. Now, do I think this can survive in this current form long term? No, but I think if they start to make the move into regular boxing, kind of wean off the celebrity and, wean into regular boxing, they can make it work. The thing is, they're going to have to get their finances in order. They made money on the Tyson fight. It sold almost 1.9 million on pay-per-view at $50 a pop. That's a pretty good number. They made a lot of money on that. I think they're going to make a lot of money on this Jake Paul-Ben Askren fight that's coming up that has Regis Prograis on the undercard. And you know what? These guys like Regis and like Teofimo Lopez, they're going to get exposed to an audience, not so much the young Jake Paul fans that I think you can't really count on as, going to buy boxing, but they're going to get exposed to fans, of other entertainment genres that maybe haven't followed boxing, that now all of a sudden say, hey, this is fun. I like this. And this Lopez kid has some swag and I like him, or, whatever. And they get into it. And so you're going to create new fans. I think it's so under the current format, I don't think it has long to run. I think people are going to get sick of seeing reggae stars fighting, and NBA fighters fighting like this, right? We don't want to see that. But I think if they can make the transition, they can survive. But if they don't, it'll be a short-term thing.
So you mentioned Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. Obviously, they sold almost just under 2 million pay-per-view buys at $50 a pop. It seems that Tyson's re-entry into the fighting game is starting to bring out the rest of these retirees. Most recently, Oscar De La Hoya, who says he's fighting July 3rd on Triller. So he has some type of agreement in place with Triller. I mean, what have you heard about that deal with Triller and Oscar De La Hoya? And is this negatively affecting his relationship with DAZN?
Well, I don't think it can help, right? I mean, because you think if Oscar came back to DAZN, want to have him on, of course they would. But now, what I think Triller's going to probably do, I know the end game for Triller and Oscar is Mayweather, and they are hoping to get Mayweather into a fight down the road. But from what I'm hearing, they're talking about a former UFC fighter, or a number of former UFC fighters as Oscar's first opponent. Like, do you really want to see that? Like, I said to somebody, I'm just happy he's not fighting Gennady Golovkin, right? But God Almighty, I mean, do you really want to see Oscar fighting a former UFC fighter? No, I just don't want to see that. But, Oscar hits a demographic that they want to hit, and they'll bring them back and they'll get eyeballs on, and you watch who they put on that undercard, right? There'll be guys on that undercard that'll hit the same demographic as Oscar does, and they hope that people will see those guys and become enamored of them.
I saw a lot of posters and a lot of retweets today, people shouting for Fernando Vargas.
Can Fernando fight at this point as big as he is, right? I mean, right. That's, Fernando living in Las Vegas now and is really big. I mean, they had a great fight. I was there in, 2002? So almost 20 years ago. I think Fernando would take the fight, but, what weight would they fight at? It might be a problem. Fernando's a big dude nowadays. Oscar, in fact, I saw him at the press conference last week. He did not talk, came in, made his announcement on stage and went out, did not speak to the media. I dropped the mic and gone. And what was funny, just a quick aside on that, they had a microphone set up for the media in attendance to ask questions. And so Snoop Dogg was up there. So I walked over from my seat, which was on the left-hand side, over to the right-hand side to get to the microphone to ask Snoop Dogg a question. And I'm standing there with the mic, and I looked to my right, and Oscar was standing right next to me. And I was like, whoa, and then somebody from Triller goes, not now. They thought I was going to try to talk to Oscar then. But getting into your question, I don't know that Vargas can make it, but if he could, I think it would be a fun fight. Maybe Shane Mosley will want to try it. Shane might be a guy that would be closer. But from what I understand, and this may tell you where Oscar is more than anything else, they're looking at a former UFC fighter to fight him.
How much do you think there's any pressure on Oscar De La Hoya because he obviously knows that, especially now that Tyson's come back, and that if he comes back into the game like he is on July 3rd, that there's a demand for these types of fights now, these types of events. Do you think he felt any pressure to come back and get some of that money that's on the table in regards to all this, because his company lost Canelo, which was a big money maker for his company for a lot of years?
I think it is just flatly ego. That's all I think it is, right? I think it's just flat ego on Oscar's part. He missed the limelight. He missed Oscar the promoter is popular, but nothing like Oscar the fighter, right? And people would scream for him when he walked through, and he doesn't have that same cachet anymore since he's not fighting, and he misses all that. And remember, the money would not be going to Golden Boy Promotions. It would be going to Oscar De La Hoya, for fighting. So that it wouldn't help Golden Boy, for him fighting on Triller is not helping Golden Boy at all. And you can say in some ways it could be hurting them because, it's going to take attention away from guys like Virgil Ortiz and Rashidi Ellis, et al., and put it on Oscar. People are going to want to talk to Oscar. But I just think it's mostly, Oscar's ego, and it's, and he's not unique in that regard. Fighters, you're in an individual sport. It's tough to, not have a big ego when you're as good as they are, and they love to have their egos fed. And there's nothing like being the one in the ring, making that walk and having everybody cheering you as you come in. Although he won't have anybody cheering him, but I think there's nothing like that adrenaline rush that those guys get, and that's what he misses.
Kevin, have you heard any whispers of potential opponents for Oscar?
Just that it's going to be a former UFC fighter. So I don't know who, that could be one of anybody, right? You're going to probably have to get somebody relatively in his, weight class. I would guess, there's going to be somebody, Oscar fought, 54 and 60 toward the end of his career. So I would think it's somebody up in that realm, maybe even up to, 170 that fought at 170 in UFC, as opposed to guys who are like welterweights and, 145, at featherweights in MMA lingo. Because I just think Oscar's probably going to be bigger, right? He's not going to, be down at that lighter weight at, 48 years old. So, start looking at, maybe they can convince George St. Pierre to come back. I don't know. That's a name I just made up off the top of my head. Nobody said anything to me about it, but I think there's, there could be any number of people right now that they could pull out.
No chance of Oscar and Dana?
Oh, Dana would love that. Dana would love the fight, but he also knows that, Dana could beat a lot of people, but he's not going to beat Oscar De La Hoya in a boxing match. So I think that would be a no.
I mean, would you bet your money that it would be like a retired MMA or UFC fighter, or could it be somebody like maybe like a Nate Diaz who fights like at 170 pounds and around the same kind of weight maybe Oscar's at?
Well, Nate was just taking a fight with Leon Edwards in the UFC. So that'll be announced, if not announced today, soon. So Nate will have
I got the alert whilst we were talking.
Oh, they sent a press release out?
It came on my ESPN or Bleacher Report on my phone as we were doing this.
Oh, okay. So, he's got a fight. So, so he's not going to be in the mix. I think it's not going to be anybody active. I don't think Dana would allow it to be anybody active. I didn't ask him. Somebody asked him at the press conference after 260 on Saturday about Oscar fighting a UFC fighter, and he shut down. It's silly. I don't want to talk about it. Completely shut it down. And so I don't think he's into that anymore. And I think, he's had enough of it. So, unless he has a change of heart, I tend to, and I don't think he wants to have one of his guys get beat by Oscar because he doesn't like Oscar. So I don't think he wants to see that.
Before we let you go here, Kevin, we kind of touched on throughout our conversation about fans kind of slowly coming back. Vegas might be at 50% by maybe May. Does it seem? I mean, you're from the Las Vegas area. You're from there, so you're more in there in person to seeing everything. Does it seem like we're on the right track for Las Vegas to maybe bring fights back? I mean, could it ideally by the end of the year could we have 100% capacity in Las Vegas?
I do think so. I mean, look, a lot of people are getting vaccinated now. I saw on the news the other day was 3 million people got vaccinated in one day. If you just do that for a month or so, we're there, right? And we have enough, to bring, to open up and have. So I think we're on the right path. I mean, from everything that I know from Las Vegas, and this is both entertainment and sports, that they're kind of looking at September, start of the NFL season as sort of like back to normal time. That up until then, it'll sort of be, getting close. But then once September comes, that, it'll be back to normal, and we'll have the seasons on the sports back on schedule, and the fans will be back in the stands, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, we've had 100 million, 125 million shots people got, so it's roughly a third of the country, so we can, keep moving that forward. I think we're in pretty good shape to by the fall, have fans and have this nightmare behind us.
Oh, and then one more thing we forgot to touch on was we were talking about like Tyson and De La Hoya coming back from retirement. Miguel Cotto and Juan Manuel Marquez are seemingly on a collision course coming out of retirement too. What do you think about that?
I mean, my thing is this: like when I'm not in favor of what I call these old guy fights, right? But who am I to say if they can make a lot of money that they shouldn't do it, right? I have the choice as a customer not to watch it, but but I just don't see how Miguel and Juan Manuel were going to make all that much money. And if they're not making much money, what do you want to do this for? I mean, you retired for a reason, right? Your body was breaking down. You got tired of the grind. You got tired of getting hit in the head, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're going to come back and do this again. I mean, boxing is a young guy sport, and it's a young guy sport who's hungry and motivated and in shape. And it's not for, 40-year-old guys who have been living the good life. And, both Miguel and Juan Manuel have been living the good life, especially Miguel. But, I don't understand why they want to do it, but like I said about Oscar before, it's you miss that limelight and you see other guys out there, and there we go.
And then there was also another one that we missed over. They're just popping up everywhere with these type of fights that are coming up. But Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and the Spider Anderson Silva. I mean, if people remember when Canelo last fought recently, Chavez Jr. went on Twitter and called him out again, like he's done in the past, and said, he was said it in Spanish, but he said, he can make the most money with me. He should fight me again. Well, obviously, I think people knew Canelo wasn't going to entertain that idea. So it looks like he's fighting the Spider Silva. What's going on there?
It's just really sad. I mean, I'm sad that, how low has Julio stepped that he's got to do this, right? And poor Anderson, it just one of the great fighters in MMA history, and he's going to go out like this. I mean, it just and who knows? I don't know what the weight is going to be when they, it's probably June 19th, right? I don't know what weight they're going to say. They'll probably say 175 would be my guess, right? Which is going to mean Anderson's going to have to cut. Chavez is liable to weigh 200. I mean, he doesn't give a shit about about any of that. And in a fight where it's on his father's card and the whole 9 yards, I mean, God almighty, it is so bizarre. And I mean, you talk about a waste of talent. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., there's no bigger screw up in the history of boxing than him, I think, and a guy that had talent, right? He had the genes, and, he showed when he was fighting at 40 and 47, he had some ability, right? And he could be good. But he never, he's one that just threw it all away.
Yeah, definitely becoming more bizarre by the day here in the boxing world and the MMA world.
They want to have me and Dan Raphael fighting now.
Oh, you know what? Now that you mentioned that, Mike did tell me right before you came on. Freddie Roach put out a tweet today saying that he can neither confirm nor deny that he's going to be training you for a matchup against Dan Raphael. How true is that, if it is at all?
Well, I can neither confirm nor deny whether I've been in contact with Freddie Roach, but let's just say if Dan knows what's good for him, he'll just stay a writer.
And then the Iron Sheik might be involved potentially.
Well, the Iron Sheik is my buddy, so anything I do outside of journalism, the Iron Sheik would be involved in. So me and the Sheik go way back, and he's my pal. So if I take a fight against you or Dan Raphael or whoever it is, the Iron Sheik will be in my corner with those curly-toed boots on.
Carrying the flag and everything, the whole getup, right?
But I will not sing the Russian national anthem. I will just write and say I will not sing the Russian national anthem.
Yeah, is the Iron Sheik? Does he watch a lot of boxing and MMA?
He does. He likes MMA more than he likes boxing, but he likes both sports. And it's like he doesn't know who the fighters are. When you talk to him, and he'll try to be describing the fighter to you, and it's like you don't know what the hell he's talking about. But and then he starts cursing and swearing and going off into Sheik mode. So it's always funny.
Absolutely.
Any funny story about how you two met, Kevin?
Well, I first met him many years ago. I was working back east, and I was doing a radio show. I was a sports writer at a local paper in Vermont, and there was a morning show that my friends did. It was a comedy morning show. And so I played I did the sports news, but it was like a joke sports news. And so I would, they wrote the scripts and I just read them. And we used to have wrestlers come on a lot. And so I got to meet the Sheik then. But I really got to know him better when I was in Vegas. And about 10 years ago, I did a story on, how he was struggling financially and had all these drug issues. And he was trying to, get his knee rehabilitated, and the WWE wasn't doing it. And it was like this sad, story. And so we became friends. And he was, this was a great story. We were at Top Golf one time. So he wasn't golfing, but he was there in the full Iron Sheik outfit, and there was his two managers and a friend of their manager and me, and we were the ones golfing. So I was hitting, and the Sheik was in the back drinking, and I got done. My turn was over, and I went and I sat in the back with the Sheik, and he's got his phone right there. And I don't think he tweets too much anymore. I think now one of his managers tweets for him because he's having his health isn't that great. But this was like about 6-7 years ago, and I sit down next to him, and he says, "Bubba, what was that fat guy's name I used to always mess with?" And I go, "Oh, Dan Raphael." And he goes, "Yeah, I wanted to." And so he tweets something out about Raphael, and immediately Raphael's like, "Why is the Sheik upset at me?" And we were sitting at a Top Golf in Vegas, banging on Dan Raphael.
Yeah, every time we see him tweet, he tweets at you guys. It's just like, what a random parry that is. But it's entertaining. It's entertaining, especially to us.
Yeah, I don't know how he got into ripping Dan. I don't know how that sort of came about, but it's it happened, and now it's like I think the Sheik is just going to continue it on.
Absolutely,
just like Sprite. Why doesn't he like Sprite?
He's trying to get a sponsorship, baby. Who knows? Who knows? But on that note, Kevin, we definitely appreciate every time you come on here on the last round. Before we let you go ahead, obviously, and plug your social media, and then obviously Yahoo Sports, where everybody can find your work.
Yep, all my stuff is at Yahoo Sports. That's where the best stuff will be at. But I'm on Twitter at KevinI, KEVINI, and also I am on Instagram at Kevin Iole. I created a Snapchat the other day, but I don't know how to use it. But somebody asked me to create it, so it's Kevin_Iole on Snapchat. But if I don't respond to you, it's because I don't know how to use Snapchat.
Well, you're on there now, so at least people know. Mike, before we completely sign off here, go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find us and follow us.
We're at the last round 12 on Instagram and Twitter, and be sure to join in next week. We'll be reviewing the big Herring-Frampton fight, and then looking forward to the Jaron Ennis, Sergey Lipinets, and Joe Smith Jr. against Maxim Vlasov.
So special thanks to our guest of the week in Yahoo Sports, Kevin Iole. For my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is the Last Round Podcast.